this hour, Tropical Storm Nicole knocking on Florida's doorstep, expected to hit Florida as a low-end Category 1 hurricane in the next 12 hours, but impacts already being felt on Florida's East Coast. Our Tracking the Tropics team is live in your hurricane headquarters to answer your questions and discuss where exactly this storm is heading. Hello there to you folks. JB here with you live on Tracking the Tropics, powered by Handyman Roofing, alongside WFLA Max Defender 8 Chief Meteorologist Jeff Biradelli, meteorologist Rebecca Barry there on the right side of the screen. They are on standby to answer your questions with the hashtags that we have all around your screen. You can use hashtag HeyJeff, hashtag HeyRebecca, hashtag HeyJB. I will be keeping my eyes on this screen looking for your comments so that we can answer them coming up in just a moment. But first, we got to get the latest. We got to send things over to Jeff for the very latest models and what's going on with Nicole to our east, Jeff.
Well, it's November 9th, and I don't know about you, I want to put this season behind me. But in order to do that, we have to get through Nicole. It's going to be with us tomorrow. So the worst impacts here in the Bay Area when you wake up tomorrow morning through the early part of the lunch hour, and then things begin to improve for most of us after that. But the worst of it is still to come overnight tonight and during the day tomorrow. We've seen some gusty showers in the Bay Area, but nothing that bad yet. However, conditions are deteriorating along the East Coast. It's very heavy surf and already coastal flooding ongoing. They're going to see about 5 feet of storm surge on the East Coast, at least parts of the East Coast. The storm right now is very slowly strengthening over the Bahamas. In fact, it's right over Abaco Island, and it's moving towards the west. It's going to move right over Freeport. Now, this area has some very warm water. Water temperature is 86 degrees in some places. That's why we expect it to briefly become a low-end hurricane. So we'll put this in motion. You can see that by 7 o'clock tonight, National Hurricane Center says that somewhere around Freeport, it could be a Cat 1 hurricane. It's the low-end hurricane. We don't expect it to strengthen too much more before it makes landfall. It's not inconceivable that it could attain winds of around 80 miles an hour, and then probably making landfall around 1 a.m., in between Jupiter and Fort Pierce. So that put it right near Port St. Lucie and Stewart, but it could be anywhere within this cone, as you can see, and then moving northwest. It's entering Polk County, give or take, tomorrow morning at around 7 a.m. So the worst impacts in Polk County when you wake up at daybreak tomorrow morning through the morning commute, which is not going to be much of a commute for a lot of folks probably staying home. A lot of schools are closed. Winds 65 miles an hour. So being that it's still a pretty strong tropical storm, we could see some gusts over 65 miles an hour in Polk County tomorrow morning, and then the system continues to weaken as it moves northwest. Now notice, right here, it's in the Big Bend area of Florida by tomorrow evening at 7 p.m., which means that in between that time, right around, let's say, 1 p.m., it's located right here on the coast of the Nature Coast, places like Hernando and up to Citrus County around Crystal River, and that's when the system has weakened, probably has winds of around 55 miles an hour. So on the Nature Coast, you could see a gust 55, maybe 60 miles an hour. As we zoom in a little bit closer, you can see where the cone is, and a lot of the Bay Area is, in fact, in the cone, even Tampa, so it's not inconceivable. This could take a slightly further south track, but right now, the models have been good. The National Hurricane Center forecast has also been good. Over the past couple of days, there's been a lot of consistency, and that gives us a lot of confidence. All right, so across our area right now, tropical storm warnings in effect for the whole Tampa Bay area. And along the East Coast is a hurricane warning that's in effect for a large area. Water temperatures. So what we're looking at here is water temperatures over 86 degrees in the purple, and there's a whole lot of that still this late in the season. And so this system's going to move across those very warm water temperatures and then probably just to the north of Tampa. Again, from Polk County through the Nature Coast, places like Brooksville, Spring Hill, Crystal River, Homosassa. Now, the GFS and Euro pretty much in lockstep with each other. You're going to notice that the computer models have really come into a consensus for the track of this system. But the good news is it's going to move in and out pretty quickly. So the worst of it tomorrow morning, early afternoon, and then it's gone by tomorrow night. The only exception to that is we're still going to see some storm surge flooding here, especially on the Nature Coast as we head into tomorrow night straight into Friday morning as the winds switch around. So what are the strongest winds that we will see? I think along the East Coast we'll see gusts probably 80, maybe 85 miles an hour. So that's the worst of it. As the storm moves westward, it's going to weaken some, so gusts maybe to 65 miles an hour in Polk County. What does that mean to you? Well, winds of 80 miles an hour, trees can be down. There'll be some superficial damage to your home. Again, that's confined mainly to the East Coast. And again, about 5 feet of storm surge there. Once the winds are down to 65 miles an hour in wind gusts, at that point, yeah, you could see a little bit of superficial damage in terms of siding to your home or roof tiles, but more likely it's just a couple of trees down here or there, and probably decently widespread power outages from Polk County eastward. West of that, you're not going to see much damage. Still some scattered power outages, more isolated power outages, and a couple of trees down with that. Okay, so take a look at the wind field, and it's a massive wind field. Some of this is due to the storm, and some is due to this clash between low pressure and high pressure located up in the Great Lakes area. So it's a very large wind swath, about 600 miles of tropical storm force winds, which are really just 40-mile-an-hour winds and more. Now, the severe winds confined to the tropical part of this system, right there in orange, and then a very small spot, if you will, of hurricane force winds moving onshore around Stewart and Port St. Lucie early in the morning. Here we are at 2 a.m. The severe winds concentrated to a very small area. Everybody else just tropical storm force gusts or winds, 40, 50 miles an hour. That's just about it. As the system moves to the west, everything begins to shrink a little bit. You notice the hurricane force winds are gone by the time the system reaches places like Polk County down into Hardy and DeSoto County and Highlands County as well. But there are some winds of 60 miles an hour across Polk County, and then those begin to disappear as they move across the Nature Coast. But again, we can't rule out a gust of 55, maybe 60 miles an hour Nature Coast, again, places like Brooksville and into Spring Hill as well. So we'll show you those wind gusts now. Here we are tomorrow morning. This is actually this morning. Let me fast forward this into this evening. So as we head into the evening hours, gusts, look at that, Jupiter, 75 miles an hour. Not out of the question that by 8 o'clock we'll start to see those hurricane force wind gusts along the East Coast. We'll move it inland. You can see the storm makes landfall around Stewart. Of course, Stewart's in the eye wall. If this were to materialize, you can see in the eye itself, the winds are much more calm. But look at that, Vero Beach, gusts to around 78 miles an hour, maybe close to 80 in places like Melbourne and even Cape Canaveral. As the system moves across early tomorrow morning, notice we have wind gusts to 60 miles an hour in Lakeland, about 57 in Tampa, maybe 50 in Brooksville. Then as we head through the later part of the morning, it's still gusty on the Nature Coast, but things are starting to improve to our south and to our east across Polk County, Hardy, DeSoto, and Highlands County. Notice here in St. Pete and Bradenton, your gusts are 35, 40 miles an hour at that point. And then the system lifts to the north and everybody starts to improve. But notice that wind with the counterclockwise wind flow pushing on an onshore flow and waves out in the Gulf 6 to 10 feet. And so we're looking at storm surge. And so a storm surge warning has been issued by the National Hurricane Center. That goes from Newport Richey and Hudson all the way up to Crystal River and Cedar Key. I was looking at some of the forecasts for the gauges here, the tide gauges. Looks like we could see surge of up to 4 feet. So places that are very low lying, if you typically flood when it gets really rough out on the Gulf of Mexico, you may need to think about sandbags. Not everybody, but some people who are very vulnerable to that kind of storm surge. If you've lived on that coast long enough, you know what kind of storm it takes to get storm surge to you. So along the East Coast, this onshore flow as we head through tonight, going to produce about 5 feet of storm surge flooding there. And then the wind switches. You'll notice it right here. There's the flow, the counterclockwise flow, and notice the wind is starting to switch around as we head into tomorrow morning and tomorrow afternoon more so. Now the high tide is going to be about 5 p.m. along the Nature Coast to about 6 p.m. tomorrow night. And then we're going to do it once again as we head into Friday morning at around 5 to 6 a.m. Another tide cycle with the possibility that we could see some flooding, 2, 3, 4 feet of storm surge. Rain totals, the highest, they're going to be to the north of the track of the storm, so northern parts of Polk County into the Nature Coast, maybe around 4 inches in some areas. Probably that's about the most. To the south of that, it's going to be closer to around probably 2 inches of rain or so. And I'm going to end with this. It is the real-time wobble tracker. So what this does for us is we're able to identify any kind of wobbles or deviations in the track in real time, so that if in fact this storm wobbles from the National Hurricane Center track, which is in red right there, if it were to move south or north, we'd be able to tell very quickly, almost immediately, that it's taking a different turn. And if it takes a different turn, it's going to have different impacts in different areas. And so this is a great tool for us to have. All right, with that said, I'm going to walk back to JB and Rebecca, and we're going to take your questions.
All right, Jeff at the wall with the very latest here, folks. And I want to remind our audience, we're now paying attention to your Facebook Live comments. Got a lot in the queue. Folks have been filing in their hashtag KJB, Rebecca, Jeff, questions and comments. Let's bring in Rebecca Barry. Rebecca, as we look here at the real-time wobble tracker, it's on WFLA.com, but this is going to get more and more valuable for us as the storm gets closer and closer to Florida's East Coast.
Absolutely. You know, we have these idiosyncrasies, just a couple 100 miles will make all the difference in terms of who sees the damage and who doesn't. And these wobbles, although they look rather infinitesimal this far out, they do make a greater impact on where the system ends up. So this gives us a much better insight in real time as to anything that might be developing with the storm's direction.
All right, let's go to the questions and comments. For those of you who have been with us here before, you know how this works. Use a hashtag on your screen for either of our meteorologists, and we can animate it on screen live like this. We start with Daisy on the WFLA Facebook page, hashtag HeyJB. If it shifts to the south, would it be close to Sarasota?
And so what we're seeing is that the further to the south that this system shifts, the greater the impacts will be across our area, but we're only talking about like 10 to 15 more mile per hour wind gusts. We're only talking about maybe an inch more rain. The greatest impact is along the east coast of Florida. You just might see higher tropical storm conditions in Sarasota as opposed to what you're expected to see now with the current track.
Let's go to the next question. It comes in from Michelle Batten and Friends Fashion page on the WFLA Facebook page. Hashtag HeyJB. Will a tornado watch, is that possible to be issued in the Tampa area, Jeff and Rebecca?
It is. It's more likely to be issued north of us. But yeah, I think it's certainly going to include parts of our area if it's issued. It would probably be Polk County. It would probably be the Nature Coast. And it may extend as far south as Tampa. But the best chance of seeing tornadoes with this system are likely is going to be on the northern side of the system.
Let's go to Ruth in our comment section. We're going as fast as we can here because we have a lot of questions and comments. There are folks asking from the Georgia coast. Savannah, living on Wilmington Island, says Ruth. What do we say as far as the Georgia coast?
So you're already starting to see higher than normal high tides and gusty winds where you are. As I'm not telling you anything new, but the Georgia coast is already starting to see pretty gusty winds and higher than normal high tides. The high tides will continue to increase in height through the middle of the day tomorrow before the winds shift and you start to see that water emptying out. I think you're probably in for 1 to 3 foot higher than normal high tides, depending on the topography of your area there on the island, and you're going to have some gusty winds. I don't think you'll have many power outages unless your power lines are compromised by trees. You know, a lot of Georgia has those historic oak trees, and they don't like to cut those because of power lines. So Georgia has especially coastal Georgia has a higher number of power outages that last longer because of that infrastructure. And so if we do see power outages, it's more likely because of the fact that we're not trimming trees.
Jennifer Brown on the WFLA Jeff Baradelli Facebook page. Hashtags for both of us, Jeff, you and I. What to expect in Brevard County, Florida?
Yeah, I think, in Brevard County, there's the chance of some gusts to 65, 70 miles an hour or so. Probably not quite hurricane force, I'd say. But, this is a pretty expansive storm. And it's not going to be a tremendously impactful storm in any one specific place. I'd say the only exception to that is it'll be a little more impactful in places like Stewart and Port St. Lucie or wherever the eye comes on shore. But everyone else is going to see kind of the same weather outside of that, with the exception of the fact if you're on the immediate coast in which you might see storm surge. But other than that, a lot of Florida is going to see a lot of the same stuff. Gust 50, 55, maybe some occasional gusts to 65 miles an hour.
Let's bring you both on screen for Ashley's question. Ashley Schilling is asking from the WFLA Facebook page, do you think it could become a 2, hashtag HeyJB? So any chance that we've been talking about Nicole being a low-end Cat 1. So the elements for rapid intensification for it to go to a 2, just they're not really there, are they?
There's no indication that that's going to happen. We haven't seen any of our computer models hint at that. It's tough this time of year. This is not just even though it's transitioned to a purely tropical system, it still has a lot of aspects that are not purely tropical. Its core is tropical, but then everything else around it's not. I doubt it. It would be difficult. Not impossible, but difficult.
I think it would have to slow down for that to happen.
That's for sure.
But that's not really in the forecast either. So not looking like.
We've got Michelle's comment in the queue, and I'm adding as many as I can to the queue, folks, so we can get in as many of your questions and comments as possible. Hashtag Hey Jeff, should we be driving in Orlando tomorrow morning?
I'd say probably not. I think it's going to be pretty nasty in Orlando tomorrow morning.
Yeah. What about just I-4 in general, Jeff?
I'd say probably not. I'd say in the morning, you're looking at gusts 60 miles an hour. You're looking at very heavy rainfall. The worst of the weather is going to be tomorrow morning, specifically along I-4.
We've got a lot of questions coming in, folks. We're going to get to as many as we can in this edition of Tracking the Tropics, but we have a lot more coverage coming your way, too. Again, Tracking the Tropics powered by Handyman Roofing here on WFLA Now. Kimberly Hardy on the WFLA Facebook page. Hashtag Hey Rebecca. How does it look for Polk County and here in the Tampa Bay area, Rebecca? we are laser focused on Polk County over the next 12 to 16 hours.
Absolutely, because Polk County will probably see the highest wind gust of our entire area. 60, 65 mile per hour wind gust, not out of question. If we do see power outages, Polk County will probably be the center of those, particularly eastern Polk County. And they'll probably see some of the heaviest rainfall as well, closer to 2 to 3 inches of rainfall across Polk County. So if anyone's, needs to take a little extra caution tomorrow, it's Polk and Highlands County, because they are going to be the closest to the severe wind gusts, while the rest of us are just going to see more tropical storm force, but below severe criteria.
Let's go to Zoe. Hashtag AJB. There's already flooding in Daytona. Should we be more concerned about flooding?
Yes, for sure. We're going to see it at high tide, especially. There's a full moon going on right now. We've had this, prolonged fetch of easterly wind flow, gale force winds. And so we're going to see it at least for a couple more high tide cycles. I'd say you're probably going to see flooding at least through the first half of tomorrow on the East Coast.
Let's go to Jamie Morgan on the WFLA Facebook page. I'll throw you both up for this one. How about Northport? We are still recovering from Ian badly. Can't handle much wind. So a couple of different comments coming in about Northport and folks that have just been in an area that have been impacted significantly by Hurricane Ian.
As much as geography did not work in Northport's favor with Ian, geography is working in Northport's favor with this system, because they will see the least of the winds, the least of the rain, and the least of the bad weather for tomorrow, just because they're so far south. Now, if there were track changes and it shifted further south, that would increase their impact. But Northport's really on the easier end of this.
Yeah, and you can see on this map right here, Englewood, Northport, similar areas, 40-mile-an-hour wind gusts. Once you get up to Bradenton, maybe 45. Once you get to Tampa, maybe 55, so on and so forth.
We're tapping into a lot of Facebook pages, not just the WFLA Facebook page. Mine, yours, I think yours, Rebecca, as well. Also, some of our sister station Facebook pages as well. And joining us from Greensboro, Lucy Strickland Adams on the Fox 8 Facebook page. Hashtag JB, when will this hit North Carolina? That's a couple days out, right?
Yeah, it starts on Friday, because this system really starts to scoot as it passes through Georgia. And so you'll start to see rain bands in North Carolina. I'm not sure exactly where you are in the state, starting on Friday. And really Friday night into Saturday will be the impact time for North Carolina. But it is racing past the Carolinas once it starts to move. So you won't see much of an impact. I know North Carolina in particular gets worried about tropical systems, because oftentimes, especially in the middle of the season, you'll get tropical systems that just kind of end in North Carolina and sit there, and we get a lot of flooding rain, especially inland Carolinas. That's not going to be the case with this one, because it's moving so fast.
Let's hit the touchscreen. Kyra's up next on the WFLA JB Facebook page. Hello to the audience over there. What about Flagler and Palm Coast?
Oh, man, I am worried about A1A right there in Flagler County on Palm Coast. It was compromised with the past couple of hurricanes, and they rebuilt it, and they're already seeing the water going over parts of A1A in that area. I've been watching some videos and seeing the sea level and the dunes. They're really in trouble. I think that the main impact for that area will be the higher than normal high tides and erosion.
Let's go to Morgan on the WFLA Facebook page. Hashtags all around. Will it become stronger once it comes towards Jackson County?
No, this storm is going to be weakening. Now, I have to be honest, I don't know exactly where Jackson County is.
Yeah, I'm looking.
Which state? Because I'm sure there's more than one.
There's several Jackson counties in the southeastern United States. So Jackson County is on the panhandle, northwest of Tallahassee, right there at Floribama. I mean, right there between the state line between Florida and
I assume that is
Alabama.
the Jackson County they're talking about. Yeah, the system's going to be weakening a lot. I mean, maybe it'll have winds of 45, 50 miles an hour by the time it reaches there.
Yeah, and the big concern when you looked at that track was, once it gets back over the Gulf, would it intensify a little bit? But I just don't see it. I think this is too spread out.
Yeah.
No surprise that we have questions coming in for Rebecca about Jacksonville, Duval being affected. This question coming in from Sharon Federico on the WFLA Facebook page.
Hey, Sharon. I think Jacksonville is probably going to have a pretty rough day tomorrow. I know all the news stations, they're going to be wall-to-wall, having you covered in the Jacksonville area. I think that if you're in an area that flooded with Ian, you're probably going to see 8 to 12 inches more of water than what you saw with Ian in terms of storm surge, especially along the St. Johns River. I think your high tides will run above normal through Thursday afternoon, and then the waters will really start to dump out on Thursday moving into Friday. And so if you can make it through that high tide on Thursday without seeing any flooding, you're probably fine. We'll probably see a couple of power outages, especially like the Arlington neighborhoods. Those more tree-laden older neighborhoods are probably going to have some power outages, and it'll probably last about 24 hours.
Let's go to the WMBB Facebook page on the Florida Panhandle. Hello to our audience on the Florida Panhandle. Will Panama City, Florida have any impacts, Jeff?
Yeah, sure. They're going to get some rain. They're going to be on the backside of the system. As you can see, this has a very expansive wind field. Panama City's kind of on the edge there. You can't even really see Panama City in this view, but we're kind of going to make our way closer to Panama City and almost get there. But you'll notice you're going to be on the edge of the wind field. You can kind of see Panama City on the very left there. It's kind of just off screen. So basically on the very edge of tropical storm force winds. So maybe some gusts 40, 45, some squally weather, some heavy rain, but nothing you can't handle. So it'll be just fine. The storm will be much weaker by the time it gets to that area.
Let me pop up on camera here for just a second to remind our audience, this is the last call for your questions and comments. Our meteorologists have a lot of forecasting to do here in the Stream Center as far as getting ready for our coverage tonight on WFLA News Channel 8. Of course, Max Defender 8's weather team going to be live throughout our newscast tonight and in the hours ahead as we monitor all the progress that Nicole makes. And again, right on the cusp right now of Category 1 hurricane status. So this is the last call for your questions and comments with any of the hashtags you see on your screen. But if we don't get to your question or your comment in this episode, believe me, we will have more episodes on whatever app, website, or social media platform that you're watching on right now. Our coverage doesn't end here. We'll have a whole lot more coming up. Let's go to the WFLA Jeff Facebook page. Hashtag Hey Jeff. What about the St. James River flooding?
That is
Jeff?
A good question. I'm gonna have to look into that because I hadn't done research into that specific area. So let us see here. To be honest with you, I just don't see that. So am I right in, hold on a second. Sorry.
Because, now St. John's River or St. James River?
I was wondering if maybe they had auto-corrected St. John's to St. John.
Okay, because there is a James River in Virginia. Yeah. And so maybe they mean St. John's. Why don't you, if it's St. John's, then yeah. I was about to say, I don't think there's going to be flooding.
Moving on for the inception that it's the St. Johns River, it does start very far south down where the system is making landfall, and it runs south to north like the Nile River, which is a little unusual. And about 2/3 of the watershed from the state drains into the St. Johns River, and so we will see elevated river levels, not only from the rainfall over the state over the next day or so, but also because of the shape of the river, the mouth of the river. Exits in Jacksonville. And so with the consistent northeasterly winds that we've seen for the past couple of days, that has driven higher water levels into the St. Johns River with each high tide and let less water out with each low tide. So the water levels across the entire St. Johns River have been getting higher and higher and higher and higher, held in by those northeasterly winds. And so you will see a very rapid shift on Thursday and as the water starts to dump out. And so parts of the river where it moves from a very wide expanse to a very narrow part, like it does in downtown Jacksonville, like it does just north of Palatka, you will be seeing higher levels of flooding there after the storm as the winds start to shift and the water drains out of those areas. It's a funnel effect, and so you get very higher levels there. And I think you'll be dealing with river flooding probably through mid next week for the St. Johns River.
Let's go to Michael Tucker. We're coming right back to you, Rebecca. Michael Tucker from the WFLA Rebecca page. Hi, Rebecca. Do you anticipate Sarasota's airport closing down tomorrow?
I don't think so. I think some of those smaller planes, like the prop planes like Silver Airlines and some of the smaller airlines that do use the Sarasota airport may not be able to get off the ground. I was on a Silver Airlines flight one time and they couldn't take off because we had 30-mile-per-hour sustained winds because it was such a small plane. So I do think some of those smaller flights will be compromised, but I don't think the airport itself would need to close unless that's just all that they had that day and they just wanted to send people home. That's the only real anticipation that I could see there.
While there are school closures on WFLA.com and some of the schools in the Tampa Bay area have been impacted, people who have asked, including Tiffany on the WFLA Facebook page, about evacuations. What about Tampa? Should we evacuate? And right now, it's just not that level of storm.
No, and usually when we ask people to evacuate, we evacuate because of water. We evacuate because of storm surge. And we're not going to see much storm surge, at least for Tampa. There will be some surge on the Nature Coast, about 2 to 4 feet as the storm moves out. That would be later tomorrow at 5 p.m., around that time. That's when the high tide is. And then again, 5 a.m. on Friday morning, 5, 6. It's in that range when the high tide is. But, this is not Ian. We're not talking, the kind of surge that would necessarily be something that would force you out of your home. So no evacuations.
I remember the Eagle flight. It was like a couple of days, maybe a day or 2 days after Ian. And, it wasn't Eagle. It was actually Wesh's chopper in Orlando. Some of the worst flooding that we saw from the helicopter coverage was in certain neighborhoods in Central Florida, outside really Orlando. And so we have this question coming in from Zoe. #HeyJB on the WFLA Facebook page. Orlando lakes and ponds already high. Should we expect them to overflow? Kissimmee, parts of the UCF community were awful after Ian. What about tornadoes for us? Are we on the northern right quadrant? And I remember UCF being one of the areas where around that college, or around that university, there was a lot of really bad flooding from Ian. So what do we say for Zoe's comment?
I don't think it's going to be quite as bad. With Ian, we were looking at some hot spots with 16 to 20 inches of rain. We're not looking at that with this system in terms of rainfall. And so I think inland flooding will not be as much of an issue as it was for Ian. I think you could pick up about 3 to 5 inches of rain in hot spots in the Orlando area.
Right. So, but there likely is going to be flooding, just because if you talk about those, and I haven't seen the ponds and the lakes, but if they are basically a capacity right now, sure, that amount of water could put them over and there could be some minor flooding. But like Rebecca said, not major flooding. And also you asked about tornadoes, and yeah, there could be tornadoes. You are kind of on the messy side of this system. And I don't think it's out of the question that we get wind gusts that are close to, not quite, but close to hurricane force. Briefly, very briefly, and very scattered, not a lot of them, just 1 or 2.
Let's go and again talk about some of the folks that might have seen impacts from Ian. Chrissy on my Facebook page, #HeyRebecca and JB. How about Sarasota County, Charlotte County? Those of us with compromised roofs already. Should we be worried?
I am worried about the blue tarps, unfortunately.
Yeah, yep.
I do think that that's the kind of roof damage that we could see. That being said, you are going to get the lowest end of the wind gusts because the storm's passing to the north of you, but I am worried that those tarps are going to be compromised. So if you have the chance to have a backup tarp to make those fast repairs, I think that would behoove you.
We have just a few more in the queue that we got to get to here. And Choi Sudamek on the WFLA Jeff Facebook page. #KJB is TIA gonna close. I guess that's, it's Tampa International Airport. It's TPA, TIA.
Right. Yep. I know. I've called it both myself. I'm always confused as to what to call it. I don't know if the airport's going to close, although it's possible. I will tell you that I know of a few people whose flights have already been canceled. So even if the airport's not closed, I think there's a pretty good chance, especially tomorrow morning through the early afternoon, that we will end up with a lot of canceled flights, which means your flight might be canceled. So will the airport be closed? I don't know. Do we have?
So I just checked the airport. It says they're not suspending operations because wind speeds are not forecast to be above 50 miles per hour sustained. They'll leave cancellations up to individual airlines. They're expecting it to be busier because the Orlando airport is planning to close. They're asking airlines to put away equipment that could be blown away.
Right. Well, there you go. That's the answer. Yeah. I mean, but you can bet that a lot of flights. I know of many flights that are already canceled.
Julie Pearson on the WFLA Facebook page, #HeyRebecca. Which areas in Tampa Bay, Rebecca, do you think will be most at risk for power outages?
I think the older neighborhoods that still have trees, I'm sure you've noticed that newer neighborhoods, they just bulldoze everything and plant trees that don't get blown over and don't get very high. And so older neighborhoods, I think Carrollwood might be one of those examples where they have those beautiful oak trees. I think that we're going to see the type of wind gusts that knock down already compromised and diseased and sickly and partially dying limbs and trees. I don't think we're going to see the type of wind gusts that knock over or snap healthy trees in half. And so I think the older neighborhoods with the more historic tree landscapes are going to be most likely for power outages.
The last 3 questions, we go to Wavy's Facebook page in Virginia. Steve Kopak, #KJB. When will Virginia Beach be impacted? Who would like to take this one?
Yeah, I can take it. So this storm is going to be moving pretty quickly. Not tomorrow, but on Friday, you'll see most of your impacts. But then by Saturday, it's going to be moving by. It's going to be moving pretty quick. It's going to lose its tropical characteristics during the day on Friday, just kind of merge with a front, and that front's going to sweep it to the north. It's going to be moving at like 5 million miles an hour well, not quite that fast, but it's going to be moving very fast, which is good news because it's going to produce a lot of heavy rain along its track, but it's going to be in and out at any one location along the eastern seaboard in probably 6 to 8 hours at max.
Let's go to Libin Derek Simpson from the WFLA Facebook page for Rebecca. What about the Nature Coast Hernando County area?
And so eastern Hernando County will see some decent wind gusts. Western Hernando County will see post-storm higher than normal high tides with a little bit of a storm surge, because once the storm pushes past us, the wind direction changes and it's an onshore wind, and we know how much wind direction affects tide levels and storm surge and flooding. And so 2 to 4 feet above normal, which for a lot of areas along the Nature Coast, they get this a couple of times a year, whether it be onshore winds or a system pushing by. So it's not catastrophic storm surge, but it is going to be very inconvenient for those more flood prone areas.
Coming your way, Jeff, for Diana. Can I fly out tomorrow evening out of Tampa, or should I reschedule?
Well, I think your airline's going to do that for you. They may cancel your flight. So if you're worried about that and you really need to get out, I always recommend people be proactive and just rebook your flight the next day if you can. Otherwise, I think you're taking a big risk because there's a good chance your flight is going to be canceled if it's not already canceled. But can you? Theoretically, yes. I think theoretically, if your flight's not canceled, then you will be able to get out tomorrow night because things will have improved a lot after around 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
And I lied. We're going to get in. We're going to sneak in one last one. Jelani Norman on the WFLA Rebecca Barry Facebook page. Hashtag Hey Rebecca. When will it clear? The big question. People want to know, when is this going to be officially in our rearview mirror? And I guess that depends on exactly where you are, right?
Absolutely. And so I think we'll start to see breaks in the rain bands tomorrow afternoon. And then by 2 or 3 o'clock, moving forward from that time period, the breaks in the rain bands will get much bigger and will start to dry out by the evening hours. And there's a pretty steep drop off once it starts to move away from us tomorrow afternoon in terms of wind speeds and wind gusts. And so we may get a wraparound rain band or two as we head through the evening hours, maybe even left over on Friday morning. But I think you have to wait till, Jelani is one of my Jacksonville friends. And so for the Jacksonville area, I think midday Friday is when it's kind of all done for you guys.
All right. And that is going to do it for our meteorologist Q&A powered by Handyman Roofing with Rebecca Barry, Jeff Biradelli. I'm JB Buno. We've got a lot more coming your way. Now, Jeff and Rebecca are going to be pivoting to, of course, broadcast television on, of course, your NBC station right here in Tampa Bay, that being WFLA News Channel 8 with the Max Defender 8 weather team. But our streaming coverage is going to be picking up in just a couple of hours, Jeff. I think we're talking in the 5 o'clock hour.
We're going to start during the 5 o'clock hour, and then we're going to continue that consistently throughout the night and tomorrow. Most of the time, there will be a live meteorologist manning the booth here. It will be myself, it'll be Rebecca. Eric will join us tomorrow morning, Lee and Amanda as well. And when we are not streaming with people, we will have lots of graphics for you. But most of the time, we're gonna have a meteorologist here, and hopefully we can answer some of your questions on YouTube, on Facebook, so on and so forth.
Yeah, if you'd like to get your question answered, Facebook Live and YouTube Live will be the best places to go. But we're also going to be streaming on WFLA.com, MaxDefender8.com, TrackingTheTropics.tv, the Max Defender 8 weather app, and the WFLA app. So a lot of different places that we were going to be streaming live to keep you posted on all the latest developments on Tropical Storm Nicole. And likely the next time that we talk to our audience, we might be talking about Hurricane Nicole. Rebecca and Jeff, we appreciate your time and all the questions, of course, that we got answered. And of course, we'll see you next time, folks, on Tracking the Tropics for continuing coverage of Tropical Storm Nicole.
Thank you for watching Tracking the Tropics.